And this is Steve Fryer, and you're listening to the Inner Light Show. And for this edition of the Inner Light program, we are with Ruth Carruthers, who is the widow of Hugh Carruthers, who is the founder of the Theological Science Society, which was founded back around 1948, and the roots go back a lot further into Pittsburgh, but the Theological Society was founded here in the Chicago area, and the Theological Society has been one of the longest advertisers in Fate magazine. Perhaps many of the listeners have seen one of the small ads for what your life is like, and it's what your life is, you can make it, and there's a secret for success. And the Carruthers Foundation has been publishing a series of home study materials for quite some time, for over 34 years. Is that right, Ruth?
Since 48.
Since 1948.
Yes.
The year I was born.
And prior to that, under the name of the Theological Sciences, the Theological Society from Pittsburgh in about 1932.
Well, I want to welcome you to the Inner Light program, Ruth.
And I want to thank you for having me.
And one of the reasons I decided to have you on this particular show is that you are just about to come out with a book on the life of Dr. Carruthers. And I'm looking at the book right now. It's not even quite off the press yet, so I'm pretty excited. I want to read a little bit from the cover flap about Dr. Carruthers. He was a fellow of the Royal Asiatic Society. He earned various degrees in philosophy, in theology, and he was also a surgeon, was he not?
Physician and surgeon.
Yes. So he was a very educated man, and he was born in England. Is that right?
Right in England.
And
yes.
he studied for over 17 years in a lamasery. Is that correct?
Yes, two lamaseries, Kangu Narain in Nepal and Kathmandu in Tibet.
And that was back in what time frame?
That would be at age 20. That's when he went there. So that would have been 87.
Okay.
About 87. 1887.
Okay.
Yes.
So Dr. Carruthers was quite an educated man, and he was accepted at quite a young age into the study of the occult, which he studied for over 17 years.
The Great Lodge of Mystics.
So,
which was founded by Osiris.
Well, let's hear a little bit more about that. Tell us about who is Dr. Carruthers in your.
He's an affiliate of the lodge, and emerged from the lodge as world teacher of the wisdom religion. It's non-sectarian.
What year was that? Approximately.
Well, it went in at 1887 and came out 17 years later. Figure it out.
So in the early part of the 1900s, 1910 or 12 or 13, something like that.
I would say about
mid-teens.
I would say early 1900s, maybe 1907, something like that.
Okay. So when he came out, what did he do then?
He practiced medicine in London. I don't know the exact number of years, but it would be until 1914 when he entered World War I as a fighter pilot.
So he was also a fighter pilot,
and he was known as, he was captain of his regiment, and he was a physician of his regiment. The three of them, captain and physician and chaplain of his regiment. And Floyd Gibbons wrote about him in the now defunct Liberty magazine. He was known as the Flying Parson. The Germans, because of his exploits in the air, called him the Flying Devil.
He must have been pretty good.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Carruthers is definitely an amazing man, and I think he's a person that our listeners definitely need to hear about. And we're trying to find out a little bit more about the early life of this man, and then how you became involved with him. If you could speak about that.
His early life, until was spent in England and in the Indian Tibet till he came to the United States in about 1920, when he began teaching the philosophy.
So he was basically originally a British subject and fought in World War I, and then after the war came over here.
Yes.
So where did he land then?
In New York. He lived in New York for a number of years.
And he was practicing physician?
He was a practicing physician. He lectured at Carnegie Hall. Appeared on radio program.
So was he also speaking about metaphysics at that point?
Well, he didn't call it metaphysics.
What did he call it?
Just a plan for better living.
But definitely came out of his metaphysical studies.
Yes.
Now, off the air before the program, you had mentioned, I think, or referenced that you feel that Christ perhaps also studied in the same area in India.
Not perhaps. The records indicate not the religious records, but the world records show that he was there. Spent 17 years. The lost 17 years referred to in the Bible. Emmanuel the Christ was in the Lamasery.
And where was that Lamasery? Is it still there?
Well, either of them, Kongu Narain and Katman and Kumbum.
Do you know if these Lamaseries are still there?
Oh yes, they're still in existence. But very little is known about them. Nobody knows much about them. The closest you can come to anybody knowing about it, the motion picture and book Lost Horizon depicted such a place. And the writer of the book must have had an inkling or an inspiration, because it was very much like the true Lamasery.
Now, according to the cover on this book, Dr. Carruthers' life was devoted to service for the betterment of others, and that he was able to apply the occult wisdom of the ages. He was a lecturer, teacher, author, world traveler, psychiatrist, sociologist, and humanitarian. And but his life wasn't an easy life, was it?
No, but let me just say, we don't like to use the word occult, because that turns a lot of people off. They think of it as being...
what does that really mean, occult?
Well, hidden, doesn't it? So we refer to it mostly as the wisdom religion.
The wisdom of the ages.
No.
This is universal wisdom.
Yes.
Now, this would be something that could be applied no matter what religion you
non-sectarian.
Brought up in.
Free thinkers, and we have members of every denomination. And it doesn't interfere with one's religious convictions.
So you have a foundation that you've been operating since before Dr. Carruthers died. When did he die, actually?
1960.
And you've been carrying on the foundation.
Yeah, directing the activities, yes.
And you have a home study course that you put out, and is that a weekly course or a monthly? or
once a month lesson, and once a month what we refer to as a chat letter. It covers a lot of subjects, but nothing in sequence. The lessons are in sequence, but the letters are just about any subject you want to think of, he'll cover in there.
Well, we'd like to know why you decided to write the book on Dr. Carruthers.
I wrote it at the request of our membership. Many of them wanted to know more about the man himself. They understood and appreciated his training and benefited from it, and they wanted to know personal things about him. So that's why I wrote it. But when I began to write it, I thought, well, gee, this is interesting. Maybe a lot of other people would be interested. And then I decided to publish it rather than just write a small book for our membership. And this book is the result.
What was it like being in the company of a man such as Hugh Carruthers? I mean, he's a very advanced soul, obviously, and very self-realized.
One of our members asked me that, and I replied to her by saying it was a joy. And that was it. He was always in good humor. He was good company. He was a brilliant conversationalist, wonderful companion. Very interesting.
I bet. It would be nice if we could tap in right now, I think. What impact did he make on your life?
Changed my life completely. From the moment I met him, I recognized him as a teacher with whom I wanted to study. And the effect he had on me was the effect he had on many people who met with him. He was a man who listened, didn't advise, never sympathized, but understood. And I mentioned in the book an article written by the late Elsie Robinson, who was a good friend. And she wrote this article about him, and that describes the way most people who met him felt. That he was like being in his presence was being like on a high mountain. And you felt clean and good. And he would say to his people who would come to consult, "You can tell me anything. I understand because I've done it. Whatever you have done, I have done." They never condoned. He never condemned.
Was he clairvoyant, would you say?
Yes. He was everything.
Did he have
he could read an aura. He could read. He knew the minute he met you, he knew more about you than you knew about yourself. He could diagnose the physical body through the skill of iridology.
Iridology?
Yeah.
It sounds like he might have had the ability to heal also.
Yes.
Being at the level he was at.
He never demonstrated that you would know it. I mean, didn't make a
He didn't make a practice out of it.
No.
I mean,
it would be done silently.
He was a physician first. How long did his medical practice last? When did he ever give that
I
up?
would say about 7 in London, about 7 years.
Oh, so it was a very short career, and then he went in more into metaphysical.
For a time in New York City, when he came to New York, he had reciprocity, and he practiced there.
Okay.
And when he was in Chicago, he was offered reciprocity by the Illinois Medical Association, but he declined. He didn't want to practice.
We're with Ruth Carruthers, who is the widow of Dr. Hugh Carruthers, and you're listening to the Inner Light program. And we will continue with more about Dr. Carruthers and his teachings right after this. And we're back. This is Steve Fryer, and you're listening to the Inner Light program. And I'm with Ruth Carruthers for this special edition of the Inner Light Show. And this is being taped in Libertyville, Illinois, at in the backyard of the Theological Science Society Foundation, which is operated by Ruth Carruthers. And she is carrying on the work of Dr. Hugh Carruthers, who is one of the great, what would you say, metaphysicians? How would you describe him of our time? From Chicago.
I'd say he was known as the world teacher of the wisdom religion. It's as simple as that. As an initiate adept from the Lodge of Mystics.
Well, maybe we could get in this segment a little bit more into the philosophy or the actual teachings a little bit. How would you describe the teachings? What is the main core tenet?
The first would be, who am I and why am I here? And because of the omnipresence of the omnipotent power in the universe, which men call by many names God, is omnipresent. It is within the individual, which connects every identity. And if you hyphenate that, capitalize the I, hyphenate identity, I, deified, the I representing the person, the entity, the deity entity, deified entity. And when one understands that connection, who he truly is and his abilities, because of that identity, there is nothing impossible for him. Can have what he wants and do what he wants and be what he wants, when he knows how. And this is what the course of training teaches, how to implement the principles of the philosophy.
This course, I understand, goes on for quite a number of years.
Like 16 years.
16 years. So.
But a person each volume consists of 24 lessons. And there are 7+ volumes. But the person who undertakes the study and applies the principles explained and how to implement them with just 24 lessons, the first 24 lessons, the first volume, you wouldn't need any more.
That's just a couple of years.
Yes, but it's such an interesting and fascinating study that our members, most of them, continue with the course till the end.
Ruth, on the back cover of the book, you have a quote from one of your students. At a time in my life, at about 48 years of age, when it is customary to roll over and quit, Dr. Carruthers lifted me up and gave me another half-century to live in health and freedom from fear. That's a pretty amazing testimonial from someone who sounds like they're close to 100.
Well, he happens to be my age, 83. And I have his file and his letters to us that would make a book. The things that he underwent.
Transformation of this man.
The accidents he had, the troubles he had, but she rose above and shrugged them off.
Using this science.
Using this at one time, it's probably about 10 years now, he was helping a nephew on his farm and he got tangled up in the tractor, went through it.
Oh my God.
All the skin was off his body. Took him into the hospital, and nobody in the hospital could understand it. He didn't have any pain. The recovery was amazing, but he wrote to me one night when he was in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Doctor appeared before him and went like this. Okay, don't worry.
Don't worry.
You're all right. And that was just one instance. Another time he took a bad fall, and when he got up, he had an ailment prior to that, but after he got up from the fall, the other ailment was gone. He said he must have had an adjustment, a natural chiropractic adjustment with the fall. But he said everything that happened, he turned into something good.
Well, I couldn't think of a better testimonial than that. So I was going to ask you, because the course is so long, some people that are alive today, we're so used to instant this and instant soup.
Yes.
And it started with Arthur Godfrey. They had instant Lipton soup and tea.
Yes,
and
he started it, didn't he?
Yeah, we can blame him.
Well, the reason.
Why would someone take the time to study?
Well, the reason for that,
course?
Doctor explained. A man said to him one time, "Oh, have you got a racket?" That's what he called his organization. You've got students, 16 years or more, and they're sending you contributions every month. That's a nice business. But what he didn't understand, Doctor could have taken all this material, put it into a volume of books, and sold it for a great deal of money. And the reader would read it, put it back on the shelf, and go out and buy another book. And this isn't what it's about. This philosophy must be lived every day. And in order to keep the mind focused on bettering yourself, we must live it. And so that is why we have these many lessons.
So it's really a course designed to allow the student to apply it practically on a day-by-day, month-by-month
ever mindful of
basis. So in other words, if you don't get beyond the 2 years, you haven't wasted your time and money.
No, not at all.
But if you want to pick it up again later, you can. But it's not going to do you any good to buy all the material, scan it through, and then put it back on the shelf.
Well, it's useless if you don't use it.
So it's really a practical application.
We have a number, not many, but we have a number of members who finished the course and then started it over again, started again from number one. There are only 3 of us left from the original group in the Chicago area who have been students and members for 50 years. That's a long time.
Over and over. What would some of these other people perhaps say they've gotten out of the study of the course, or the application, I should say?
Well, they've never set out anything in particular except it's part of their life. This is their life.
What kinds of things would one be, say, asked to do as a part of the application of the lessons?
Well, as I say, the first lesson explains the identity with the infinite, and it covers, and the other lessons in the first volume cover the 3 parts of mind: the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the omniconscious mind. And in the reading that we ask our readers or our members to read each lesson at least 3 times during the week, so that we're constantly impressing the consciousness with this information and using it. And what we are doing is building a new subconsciousness, trying to wipe out all the garbage that's in there. And
that takes a while, does it not?
Yes.
What was Christ's quote? You can't put new wine in old wineskins.
Yeah.
That's what he meant by that?
Yes.
So you do have to do some clearing out.
Yes.
And you do that by contemplating truth?
Yeah. Yes, and trying to think of it in your daily life as much as you can. Just make it's a part of your life. Everything you do revolves around who you are and what you think. And you do and are what you think.
Where do you see most people today? I mean, where are people at in their spiritual development?
Today there's an explosion. There's a revival of spirituality. Not religion, spirituality.
There's a desire for that, a thirst.
And this has happened in the last 60 years. Up until the time he passed in 1960, there wasn't a great call for this kind of material, this kind of reading material or study. There wasn't a magazine. The only magazine that would even take our ad. There were only 2, Fate and Horoscope. Now, how many magazines are on the market today?
Oh, dozens.
How many teachers? How many books? How many organizations? We're flooded with it. That's what's going to save this country, a spiritual awakening.
Let's hope so.
And because this country was divinely inspired. And that's one reason why Dr. came to the United States. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders, was a student of the Comte de Saint-Germain. He was the 9th master to come out of the Lodge of Mystics. He was a student. The principles of the wisdom religion are contained in our Constitution.
I always found that to be so amazing, and yet you look at what's happening here in this country, and you see politically what's happening. It doesn't look good right now with the health care plan they're trying to ram down our throats, and it sounds like socialism and things like that. Well,
that's what it is.
Thinly disguised as a health care plan. And you wonder, where, what happened to our constitutional rights? It's been trampled on.
The people who have been trampling on our rights are going to be surprised one day because the American people will not accept it.
We have to take our power back.
Yes, and it will be taken back.
You think it's part of the natural
Absolutely.
evolution?
Absolutely. This is residents of this nation are like none other in the world.
We certainly aren't well loved around the world, are we?
Well, because we poke our nose into other people's business.
I don't think that's the wish of the common man.
No.
I think it's from what I heard another program was put out by the Spotlight people, and they talk about the conspiracy theories quite a bit, and they're saying that in the Nation of Islam and so forth, they're giving their point of view on how Americans are.
But when you mention conspiracy to anybody, they look at you like you're out of your mind.
Well, their basic idea is that we are not governed by the will of the majority. It's more of a group, a very small group, who's an elite group that's weaseled their way in.
Yes,
and disguise their actions and intents.
But that's dangerous talk.
A part of it, yeah, it is very dangerous. But you don't hear about it on the major media, nor do you hear about things like this that often. The things that we're talking about. But that's our goal. We're with Ruth Carruthers, and my name is Steve Fryer, and you're listening to the Inner Light program. And we'll be back with more on the life of H.G. Carruthers, the founder of the Theological Society, right after this. And we're back. This is Steve Fryer, and you're listening to the Inner Light program. And I'm with Ruth Carruthers in Libertyville for this special edition of the Inner Light show. And Ruth is the widow of Hugh G. Carruthers, who was the founder of the Theological Society, which was started right here in Chicago back in
1948.
1948, yes. He was quite a man, and I wanted to know a little bit more about what he was teaching, and you had mentioned something about attending some lectures back in those years. What was it like? What was the atmosphere, and how many people attended these kind of lectures?
The atmosphere was electric. 3,000 people in the audience, spellbound he talked for 4 hours. Start at 8, take a 15-minute intermission, where I found out later, he changed his clothes because he was wringing wet. He put on a whole new outfit. And during that 20-minute period, people in the audience many of them would enroll as members to receive the course of training. But he talked about everything, but primarily how to have what you want, visualization. And he would say, if you follow my formula, if you don't get what you want in X number, usually it's in a cycle of 7, I'll stop preaching. And he was so persuasive that many people did, myself included. I was a young woman, and I wanted a car. So he would say, whatever it is you want, you go shopping. You go window shopping, and you pick out what you want. And you got the perfect picture. So I selected a convertible automobile. And I didn't have a dime. Just like many young women, I spent all my salary. But I visualized the car. And I had an uncle who was trading in his Studebaker. He drove Studebakers those days. Trading it in, and he knew I wanted a car, so he sold me the car for $75.
Was that a good deal in those days?
Yes, $75 for a car.
I know.
But it gave me a lot of trouble, so I went shopping for a new car, and a friend of my brother's was a car dealer. He was a DeSoto Plymouth dealer, and I went to him, and he took my old broken-down car as a down payment, and I bought a convertible.
Pretty snazzy.
Pretty snazzy. And the payments on it were $34 a month.
Boy, I'd like that right now.
So I did this in about 3 months. This all happened. So it worked.
So you were convinced?
I was convinced.
You bought the program?
Yes.
So were you dating him at that point?
No. No, he was married, had a wife and son. I was merely a student. And it wasn't until after his divorce in 1948 that when his wife left him in 1948 and divorced in 49, and I was invited to become a member of his staff and work with him.
What was that like? in those days?
Well, I lived in the house with him and his then manager, Mary Morrell, the late Mary Morrell. We lived together.
This is in Chicago?
This was in Bangor, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Headquarters were there at that time. And we left, so I was with him then as a member of his staff until 1953. And that was when he proposed marriage.
So you had quite a long time to get acquainted.
Yes. So
nice.
no, there was never any romance in those years. No, he's strictly my teacher.
I see. Well, that was a good introduction for you. Well, I want to know more about these teachings. He talks about visualization. Does he get into? Does the course get into yoga, breathing practices and things like that?
We have a series of lessons on breathing, the scientific occult breathing. Men and women do not breathe alike.
They're different in that way.
Yes, in that respect. And you breathe at a certain time of day through one nostril and through the other, the opposite nostril. And there are breathing exercises.
What does this do for one?
Tones the body. That's the secret. One of the secrets of life is the control of the breath flow.
Does he get into the conservation of breath?
Yes.
Like
retention. Yes.
Yogananda, and they have a similar
breath.
home study course, and they get into conservation, or you kind of stop breathing.
When he slept, he didn't breathe.
See, this is amazing to me.
And if you ever noticed in yourself, there are times when you don't breathe when you're asleep.
Well, there's times when I don't breathe when I'm awake too. I'm driving the car, all of a sudden I realize I haven't breathed in quite a while. And I used to think that was negative, bad thing. But now I'm becoming convinced that yoga teaches the more you breathe, the shorter your life is.
The deeper you breathe and holding it. And the short-lived creatures on Earth, such as the birds, short lives because they don't have deep
tiny
breathing.
Little breaths.
Yes, little breaths. Breathing kills us.
Isn't that something? I mean, we have such an emphasis in our society today on health and going to the health club and running and working out and all of this. You take in tremendous amount of oxygen and you're breathing constantly.
He never exercised a day in his life. He had the physique at age 90 of the man of 50. He didn't have a wrinkle. He didn't have a liver spot. He didn't have varicose veins. He was as solid as a rock. And he used to say to an audience, if you could put your finger on my back muscle and indent it 1/16 of an inch, I'll tear the muscle out and give it to you. He's like a brick wall.
And he didn't work out.
Didn't work out. He never lifted weights. He did nothing but breathing. And his exercising consisted of walking a few steps, then walking on his toes a few steps, and then walking again, and up on the toes again. That tensed the muscle, that stretched the muscles. He likened it to a rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
Take a rubber band, put it in the drawer, and leave it there for 6 months, and you take it out and pull on it, it'll break. But you do that every day for 6 months, and it'll be as supple as it was the day you went in there.
I like this. I think I have a very similar philosophy because I stopped working out, and something didn't seem right to me about this repetition and weightlifting and all of this and that. Although I think if you want to do that, you can. Jack LaLanne is a good example. And I think he's a student of the science of mind as well.
He said the person who lifts weights doesn't develop muscles because of lifting the weights. It's because the thought when he's doing it that he's going to be making muscles.
So he could just as well do that.
Do it in your mind. Do it in your thought. There again. Thought controls your life.
Well, I like that a lot better. I could lie in my bed and visualize lifting 500-pound weights.
Absolutely.
I haven't lost much muscle tone since I stopped working out.
An ill person can lie in bed and visualize themselves well. I had a niece who was stricken with polio, and she was about in her 30s. She had 4 children. And while she was in the hospital, she said to her family, the first thing I want you to bring me is a pair of shoes. She had those shoes on the bed with her, and she visualized herself walking.
That's a very creative way of recovering.
She's in her 60s today.
Last summer I shot a documentary on a man who healed himself of AIDS using a similar technique.
Absolutely.
But he had to turn his back on the medical establishment and all the claptrap that they were preaching at him. He instinctively knew that, and he had to go within, and he would sit in front of the television, and before he knew it, he would be off in another world. And within just a couple of short months, he was very, very healthy and back to work and stronger than ever. And I had seen this man a year prior to that experience, and he looked like skin and bones. He was horrible looking, but he was believing what they were telling him.
Well,
so in a way, the medical establishment was superimposing a vision of death on him.
Well, they're teaching it now, some of the doctors. But we are in the age of Aquarius, the age of enlightenment. And Aquarius is the constellation that the grand man that strides across the arc of the heavens, pouring the water of life onto the earth. And that was the water sign into which Emmanuel the Christ was born. That was known as the water sign.
That began the age of Aquarius?
Well,
the Piscean age, actually.
That is the Piscean age.
That's closed out.
The water age.
That's closing out now.
Yes. So this is the age of enlightenment, and that's why we are reading about and hearing about things referred to now as metaphysical, spiritual.
Did Dr. Carruthers, did he delve into the importance of diet in health and spiritual?
Yes. He favored the vegetarian diet, but he didn't follow it.
So it really didn't matter.
In the monastery. And he would, usually he would recommend a very simple diet, maybe meat only 3 times a week, lots of vegetables and salads, no fried foods, ice creams and pastries and all this. But he said to me one day, I'm going to let you in on a secret. It doesn't make any difference what you eat. It's what you think.
About what you eat?
Yeah. And that's what the Christ said. Give no thought to what goes into your mouth. It's what comes out of it.
It's what you believe.
But he blessed everything, everything he came in contact with, every person he met, every morsel of food that went into his mouth, and every liquid he drank. He blessed everything.
What did Dr. Carruthers have to say about finances, prosperity in this realm, business, this kind of thing?
Again, it's all a matter of visualization. You don't visualize money as such.
Okay.
You visualize what money would buy for you. You have a room full of money, and do you no good.
Well, maybe you could have a room full of money, but
he gave a lecture one night about respect for money. There's a lot to it. It's kind of a cute story about every time he had bought something, and the bill he paid for went into the till, and it was neat and clean and not crumpled. He treated money with respect. And the other bills in the till said to the bill that had just come in, you are nice and crisp and clean, not wrinkled, not dirty. Where did you come from? He said, I came from Dr. Carruthers. He blessed me when I went into his hands, and when I left him, he blessed me again. And you'll be very smart if you'll try and get to him yourself.
That sounds like a good philosophy. To bless your
Have you
money.
ever seen somebody, particularly I've seen women take out of their purses a wad? He didn't. He smoothed every bill, and he put the big bills on the top, the ones on the bottom.
I do the opposite.
I put the big bills on the top, too.
I guess I need to make an adjustment. So we've covered, let's see, exercise, diet, money. What other unique outlooks would Dr. Carruthers have?
he was such a good conversationalist. Tell you a story. We met a young couple, friends who were members, invited friends of theirs to meet Doctor. At the time, Doctor was 92. So he said, would you come to dinner tonight? So this young couple. We're having a friend, he's 92. And this young man had accepted the invitation, and he went home to his wife, told her, and he said, I don't know why I accepted. Why in the world, what do we want to go and sit with a man 92? So he said, I entered the room. The gentleman was already there, and he stood up and he said, this bombshell walked across the room, grasped my hand, and greeted me. We sat down at dinner at 7 o'clock, left the table at 2 in the morning. He talked all that time. Doctor talked all that time about everything you can imagine. This young man said, nature called me several times during that period, and I couldn't go. I couldn't leave. I was afraid I'd miss something. Well, he knocked at our door the next morning at 9 o'clock, said I wanted to become a member.
I would expect so.
He was a carpenter at the time, and within a year he was a contractor. A very good business.
Well, it sounds like there's a valuable philosophy worth looking into. And we're with Ruth Carruthers, who is the widow of H.G. Carruthers, the founder of the Theological Society, which was founded in the Chicago area back in 1948. And it's been rolling along quite well ever since with the home study course, which is primarily offered through Fate magazine to the public. But we'll be talking more in the final segment with Ruth Carruthers. And this is Steve Fryer. I hope you stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this. And we're back. This is Steve Fryer, and you're listening to the Inner Light Show, which is being taped on location in beautiful Libertyville in the backyard of the Theological Society Foundation of Dr. Carruthers. And we're speaking with Ruth Carruthers, who is the widow of Dr. Carruthers. And I wanted to know, Ruth, do you still feel the presence of Dr. Carruthers? It's been, about 14 or 15 years?
34 years.
Since he passed on?
34 years.
34 years?
Yes.
That's quite a while for you to be carrying on this work. You must feel some guidance or presence.
I don't say that I do consciously, but I know that he's around all the time.
You had mentioned that some of the other students have actually seen him when they're in time of need.
Yes.
Like any guru or master would show up.
We had a member who was a psychic, but she doesn't practice as a psychic. She acts now as a counselor. But she called me some years ago and said that she had, on a trip from California back to Arizona where she lived, they stopped to lunch, evidently had a picnic lunch, and on the way home she had 3 seizures. And she said to me, what do you think caused it? Well, I wouldn't have the slightest idea. And I said, why don't you ask Doctor? And when you find out, call me and tell me. She had been to the chiropractor. He found nothing wrong with her. She was not in touch with medical doctor, just the chiropractor. He found nothing wrong with her, but she did. She went into the silence, as we are taught to do, meditation. We call it silence today. It's referred to more as meditation. And he appeared before her and told her what had happened. She'd had a bad reaction to almonds. She evidently ate too many almonds, and as I understand it, almonds are not easily digested unless they're chewed thoroughly. And he said, there's something out in your head as a result of that. He said, I'll give you an adjustment.
A spinal adjustment.
Yeah, well, whatever. It was the head. And she said to me, I freaked out. She said, I felt it. She felt his hands on. But she can at will contact him, and she does frequently. It's many others do. They write and tell me. They're excited and happy about it.
That's amazing.
Though I don't see him, I've not seen him. I heard him once. and it's you hear it in your head,
Right.
and that's the only time. But I know that His presence is with me, as it is with all of the students. In addition to elder brothers, today they're known as angels. We refer to them as elder brothers who've gone on before us.
Noah's angels?
But we hear so much about angels today,
Yes.
the books and all.
Oh, definitely.
So it rose by any name, the smell is sweet. So we refer to them as elder brothers because there is no sex on the other
Right.
side,
Mm-hmm.
no female or male. And what was I saying? So that I know that the elder brothers are in attendance.
So, do you actually ask for guidance from some of the
Well, that's part of
elder
my
brothers?
meditation every day. And as far as the presences surrounding me and in our home, there have been a number of people who've come into my home who have seen them standing alongside me. And I mentioned some of those in the book more than once.
Well, I can't wait to read this book. Ruth is the author of the book about the life of Dr. Hugh Greer Carruthers, his life and teachings, and it's full of remarkable stories, and some of the chapters involve radio scripts from when he was on the radio
Yes.
a number of times on WCFL back in the, what was it, the 50s?
No, 30s,
In
late
the
30s.
Okay.
And a few selected essays.
And it just looks like it's well put together and well written, and the cover is very attractive, and it's not on the market yet, but it will be shortly. So hopefully at some point we'll be able to have you back on the show to continue, because we're getting close to running out of time here, and I have to apologize for the lack of time. But we could leave our listeners with one perhaps bit of advice that Dr. Carruthers might have wanted to give about how to conduct your life.
Well,
I think that would be appropriate.
he had a favorite saying, be a little bit loony. How did that go? But anyway, he also had another one about the commandments. He said that should have been the 11th, and not the 11th. They should have left out the one about thou shalt not commit adultery, because no one was going to pay any attention to that. But his final commandment would have been, thou shalt not take thyself too damn seriously.
Sounds like the mark of a master. The humor. The humor is, I think, is a very good sign that someone is a master.
I asked him one time, we were talking about funny stories, where they come from. He said, they come from the masters.
So he was in touch.
Everything comes from...
He had masters in touch with him the whole time.
Oh, yes. He said the happiest times of his living was when he spent with them. And that would be when he would go into meditation. It was like, I likened his life to a person who had no contemporary.
So he had no one to relate to as a buddy.
Who understood what he
yeah.
was talking about, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, picture oneself as being in the company all your life with kindergartners.
A tough job for anyone. I want to thank you for being on the Inner Light program, Ruth Carruthers.
And I want to thank you.
And it's been a real honor and a privilege, and I hope I can have you back again sometime after the book comes out and there's some time for it to sink in. Thank you again.